One of the joys I have about streaming most of the things that I watch now is I don't have to deal with commercials. Advertisements go by every once in a while. I usually can skip through them. And the thing that I really don't have to stop and watch are infomercials. Now, I had a mother-in-law that loved those things and the closet's full of stuff to prove it. And they would have a similar formula when they were doing these things. They would start off telling you about why you needed the product. They would show you some amazing things it would do. And then they would add this line, but wait, there's more. Last week, we started talking a little bit about how the fact of the matter is, whether you like it or not, you are a human being, and that means you are bound by some of the laws that all human beings have to be bound by. Last week, we said that the fact of the matter is, you have to relate to other people. You don't get a chance to kind of exempt yourself from that. You are going to have to deal with other people. We're designed to be connected. But that's not going to stop things because there's more to it. When you're relating to other people, conflict is inevitable. Now, I don't know, maybe you're one of those people that really loves conflict. You kind of thrive on it. You're looking for ways to stir the pot, to bring things out, to kind of win an argument or get into debate. Maybe you're the opposite of that and you completely avoid all the kind of conflict that you can. Whatever you have to do to make things quote-unquote peace, you're willing to do. And I think part of the reason that we have this kind of split on this is because we think conflict is bad. We usually think of it as something that takes things from us, right? And so we're worried we're going to lose something. We have a fear we're going to lose our job. If we get in a conflict here, we fear we're going to lose our friend. Fear we're going to lose intimacy with our spouse. Fear we're going to lose the respect of our kids. Whatever it is, we're worried about what we're going to lose. A lot of times, really, though, it just comes down to that we're scared we're going to lose our comfort. But just because there's conflict doesn't necessarily mean that something bad is happening. In fact, it kind of livens things up sometimes in a good way. Think about the best stories that you know. If it's a good story, I guarantee you there's some conflict there. Whether it's Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, whether it's the Lord of the Rings stories, whether it's Mickey Mouse trying to get away from Pete the cat, whatever it is, the stories that tend to resonate the most with us are the stories that have some conflict in them. Life would be pretty boring without it. And the other thing about it that makes it so it's not so bad is that without conflict, we probably wouldn't see much growth either. Both within ourselves and within the relationships that we have. And so we have to deal with conflict if we want to grow and develop and become who we've always been intended to be and to live out to our fullest ability with this life that we've been given. We have to learn how to deal with conflict. We have to learn how to process conflict appropriately. But maybe you're still back a little bit ago and you're wondering, why in the world do I say conflict is inevitable? What if I'm just nice and kind? What if I just get by and I kind of avoid as many people as I can? Then won't I be okay? What if I only hang out with people that agree with me and all these things? Well, the problem is you still don't get away from conflict. It is still inevitable. And the short answer why is because we are all different. Which is why who holds the remote in your house holds such power. Because we all want different things. We all value different things. Some of the things that we have are different understandings. Sometimes we call these assumptions. They're the ways that we look at the world. And we see things that happen and we have different understandings, different assumptions, even if we saw the same thing. And that makes a difference on how we deal with things. I was at a wing place once. I was going there to eat with some of my buddies, and we walked in and we wanted to know what the special was for the day. Trying to make sense of what we wanted to eat, what kind of stuff we wanted to get there. And the waitress kind of looked over at us and smirked a little bit and says, well, wings are on special because this is a wings place. And some of us thought that she was being incredibly rude. And some of us thought that she was just, being kind of funny and making jokes and trying to win us over with her humor. And so we were the same thing viewed by two different understandings. And some of us were ready to tip her more, and others were ready to walk out. Different understandings matter when it comes to conflict. We also have different expectations. We expect different things in the relationships that we have with people. This is huge when it comes to marriage. Almost 50 to 60%, I feel like, of the premarital counseling I do with people deals with expectation setting and working through that. Who's going to take the trash out and when? Whose responsibility is it to do the dishes? How much time are you allowed to spend alone, and how much time do you need to spend together? When you have people that have very different expectations for these things look very different for them. They have differences of values. For some of you, being on time is the most important thing, and for others of you, looking your best is the most important thing. And sometimes those two things will clash because it's time to go, but you aren't quite looking just right. Your hair is not going where you want it to go, or the dress doesn't look like it's supposed to, and you've got to change and get ready. And that's more important than getting there when you said you would. And the person that's waiting for you, who values time, is looking back at you like you're an idiot. And you're looking at them like they don't understand because you have different values. And because of how you were raised or the things that you've experienced, you value things more than others. And those differences of values, when they clash, lead to conflict. And then conflict, if you didn't already have it, will often come because you and I have different ways of dealing with it. We have different conflict strategies. Some of you, if conflict just comes up, you're just not going to deal with it. Like, we're going to act like it doesn't exist. And we're going to smile a little wider, and we're going to tighten our belt a little bit more, and we are just going to keep moving forward as if nothing bad is going on around us. Because we don't want to deal with it. For others of you, as soon as the conflict comes, you're ready to go. The earrings come off, the fists come out, and the cuss words start flying. And you're not dealing with whatever the issue is that caused the conflict. You just want to win. And for some of you, instead of doing those things, you're going to just kind of shut down or shut out what's going on. And you're going to go into yourself. And now imagine in a relationship when two of those different styles come into contact with each other. You didn't have conflict before, you're really going to have it when you start working out these strategies. And so conflict is inevitable. We have too many differences. There is one thing that's in common with a lot of our strategies, though, for dealing with conflict, and that's the fact that they're terrible. They are not good, and they do not help us get what God desires from us. Because God desires that our dealing with conflict, our relationships, should be redemptive and reconciling. They should bring things as much as possible back together. But we don't do that because we don't know how. Instead of some of us, we don't know how to do that, so we prefer trying to win. As long as we get our way, then it's okay. For others, it's like, I don't know if I win or not. That's not the issue. I just want you to lose. And so we will use scorched earth tactics and just burn the whole thing down when there's a conflict. Some of the ways that we typically deal with conflict that do not help us, well, some of them specifically hurt ourselves. Things like keeping everything bottled up inside. Just because you're not in an active fight with someone does not mean there is not conflict. And all of those feelings that you are stuffing back down and you're trying to lock down and tamp them down will not stay there forever. I remember growing up, I would go to my grandparents' house sometimes and they would have a garden in the backyard. And one of the things I would love is when they would make green beans in the pressure cooker. And the pressure cooker, the pressure would build up and build up and build up. And there was like a little valve thing on top of the lid of the pressure cooker. And when the pressure became too much, instead of blowing the lid, the pressure cooker valve would release and this stuff would shoot out of it and regulate the pressure. But you never knew when that was going to happen. And if the valve was broken, well, then you were really in trouble, because then that whole thing was going to blow up. A lot of us live like we're pressure cookers. And sometimes we have a valve that works and sometimes we don't. But either way, this is what I know. You never know when what's inside of you is going to come out. But it is guaranteed to show up in your life somewhere, some way that you can't control. And when you explode on someone that has nothing to do with what you're actually upset about, that's this. When you yell at your kids because you're mad at stuff at work, when you get angry at the person driving in front of you because of what you got into with your wife at home, that is this at work. You've kept it bottled up inside, and instead of directing it, the conflict towards who you actually have something against, you're going out in all kinds of directions. The opposite of that is to kind of hide it. So you're going to hide the conflict a lot of times with vagueness, or maybe behind a screen on your phone or on your computer. So, these kind of people, they post things that are really vague, but you know that what they're talking about is about a specific person, a specific incident. They just don't want to say it out loud. Isn't that annoying? They're like, what is going on with you? What are you really going through? And this is kind of venting without dealing with anything doesn't help in the long run. It might make you feel good in a moment, but it makes you look bad, and you still haven't dealt with what's causing the conflict. So it's just going to fill back up and fill back up again and again on you. And then the last thing we do that typically hurts us more than everybody else is we lie. This might be the most common one. How are you doing today? I'm fine. Everything's great. I'm doing okay. Yeah, can we just get back to what we're doing? I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Nothing's wrong. And we think that lying is going to make things better. Tell me, have you seen a lot of evidence of that? Some of the things we do don't just hurt us, they hurt other people as well. Like when we talk to everyone but the person you are in conflict with about something. And this is hard. Because, we have these close friends in our lives that we're able to talk to them about everything, or we should have these things in our life to help us process what we're going through. And it probably would be okay to process something with them like one time without bringing in the people that you're actually in conflict with. But if you keep rehashing the same thing over and over again, you're not really getting over it, and you're not trying to get over it. In fact, you're probably not trying to get through the conflict. You're probably trying to get allies with you in the conflict. And that's what you hope all these people that you're talking to, whether it's gossiping over here or sharing quote-unquote prayer requests over there, or just saying with your friends, hey, I don't want you to share this very much, but let me tell you what's going on, and then saying the same thing to somebody else and the same thing to somebody else, but never talking to the person who you're talking about. How is not going to that person ever going to resolve the conflict? And it can be dangerous for those of us who are spending time listening. Because if we're listening and the person is never trying to lead to resolution, why do we keep listening to them? Why don't we point them where they're supposed to go and help them get there? Because if we don't, maybe it's because we feel important. Like, oh, they need me. Look out. Maybe it's because I'm in on the secret. Maybe because it helps me feel like I've got some sort of connection or intimacy. But what it doesn't do is lead to redemption and reconciliation for anybody. And so this is the setup of what it typically means to be a human being dealing with conflict. But instead of this process, Jesus gave us an actual process to resolve conflict in redemptive, reconciling ways. And he asks us to trust the process. And I have to give that warning up front, because this isn't an easy process to do. When I even do it in my own life, there are times when I think, how much easier would it be to not do this? How much do I squirm sometimes to be obedient to what God is asking of me? It's not easy. You see, one of the things is Scripture always puts the responsibility to resolve conflict on me and not on them. If I think that they've wronged me, I go to them. If they think I've wronged them, I go to them. And even though it's hard, it's better than the alternatives that we've currently been living with. You see, unresolved conflict does not go away. It creates strongholds within our spirit. Strongholds of bitterness, of envy, of worry, of doubt, of deceit, of anxiousness. And these strongholds, where conflict is unresolved, is often where the enemy will attack us and find ground to take. But the process of Jesus breaks those things loose in our lives. It helps restore healthy relationships and helps us to process and deal with the conflict that we come up with. And it's based on listening above all else. Because listening is the first responsibility of love. And so what are the steps to this process? In Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 to 17, Jesus gives us the steps. And I like the way Eugene Peterson writes it in the Message, so I'm going to read from his version as we go through the steps, starting again, Matthew 18, starting at verse 15. If a fellow believer hurts you, go and tell him. Work it out between the two of you. If he listens, you've made a friend. I like the new NIV version of that, though. It says if he listens, you've gained a brother. You've regained a friend. So how does this first step work? You're meeting one-on-one. You're going to deal with one specific issue at a time. And you're not going to do it in a way that's accusing, but in a way that is engaging. So that means some of the sarcasm, some of the things you might use are going to be out the window because you want to show up and deal with what's going on and let them talk to you about it. So you want to understand where they're coming from before you're worried about being understood. It's like we talked about last week. We want to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And if we bring these conflicts that we're having, these differences with our brothers and sisters and say, this is what's going on, this is how it's making me feel, where are you coming with on this, what are you thinking, without the assumptions, without the blaming, without the accusing. It is amazing how just that first step will eliminate so much of the conflict that we have in the healthy ways. But sometimes that doesn't work. So he keeps going. If he won't listen, take one or two others along so that the presence of witnesses will keep things honest. And try again. In other words, use a mediator. Sometimes you just cannot get through. You are not communicating together well. And so you need someone else. Someone who you know the other person respects and will listen to. And someone that you respect and you'll listen to. Who's mature enough to handle the conflict that's facing you. I've used these before in relationships that I've been in, and it is incredibly helpful because it is so eye-opening when a mediator is involved and suddenly they're being able to tell you, hey, you thought this was going on, but this was your fault, or this has got something to do with you, not the other person. And it's incredible to watch as you say something that falls on deaf ears, and suddenly they're able to restate it in a way that connects with the other person. And if you pick a good mediator, suddenly you again have the chance to come back together in a redemptive way. And if you didn't take care of most of the conflict before, you really take care of most of the conflict after this. But sometimes, and again I'm going to say this, very few times, even that doesn't work. And so there's another step. If he still won't listen, tell the church. Now, I'm not suggesting that this means get your church mailing list and send out an email or start a phone tree about what's going on, especially if you're going to do it from a very one-sided way. I don't think you mean after they sing the songs and before someone gets up to preach, you stand up, excuse me, Pastor, we've got something we've got to deal with before we get into everything else. Me and Judy, we are just not seeing eye to eye and we've got to get this worked out. I don't think that's what this means. I do think this means that you are to call on the church for spiritual help. Get somebody in leadership. It doesn't have to necessarily be a pastor. It can be one of the teachers, one of the board members, one of the leaders that has good spiritual wisdom and have them help you talk through what's going on. It just brings another level of accountability, another level of care to the circle of what you're trying to do. Because remember, it's not about winning an argument, it's about regaining a brother or a sister in the process. But again, even that sometimes doesn't seem to do it. So if you won't listen to the church, you'll have to start over from scratch. Confront him with the need for repentance and offer again God's forgiving love. New NIV version says, treat them like a Gentile or a tax collector. Some people think that means it's time for shunning, because those are dirty people and we want them far, far away from us. And when I hear that, I say, did you read the Gospels? Because I don't think that is the way that Jesus treats things. To those who others would shun, Jesus invites them to draw near. He loves them. He shares himself with them. But he realizes that there isn't the same closeness there that there may have been, and he lets their choices be respected. He doesn't try to force things. He welcomes them to come and learn from him and follow him, but he doesn't make them do that. And so because they aren't forced to be together with you, they may walk away for a time. Now remember, you need to go through the steps before you get here. But it could be that when you get to this place, you're like, you know what, I'm going to respect you enough to separate for a season. The season might be permanent, it might be just for a short time. But the reason you do that is to respect the other person and to give space for God to work in you and in them. That when you have the chance to come back together again, neither of you are the same. And there's a place of growth that you can work through towards redemption. Meet one-on-one. Bring others to mediate. Get spiritual help from the church. And then respect them by letting them go their separate ways if that's what's needed for God to work. If you follow this process, conflict becomes redemptive. It becomes reconciling. And it becomes an incredible way for God to grow you and the people that you're in conflict with. Trust me, I know it is not easy, but it works like almost nothing else can. To help you not be so scared of conflict, and to help you actually get to learn how to love and be loved like God loves you. So the next conflict that comes up, will you let Jesus help you through this process? Will you trust the process before you even get to the conflict and commit to it now? And if you're currently in the middle of some conflicts, maybe the other people don't even know they're in a conflict with you, but you're in a conflict with them. Would you trust the process today and begin to see how God will help you work through that if you'll do these things He's asked you to do? If you want to see God move, be obedient to what He's already revealed and see what happens. Lord, I pray that as we work through these conflicts that we find ourselves in, because you've created us with beautiful differences and diversity, we would trust you enough to do the things you've called us to do in the way you've called us to do them, that we might see you work and we might see redemption and growth even in the middle of the conflicts we face. Amen.